Thank you. I was told I have to use this for the recording. So I'm Ramona Halcomb. I'm the Indian Education Specialist for Oregon Department of Education. And here's my colleague.
Hi, I'm April Campbell. I'm the Indian Education Advisor for the Oregon Department of Education.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexis Uintili. I'm interning at the Indian Education Department.
Thank you. Well, I want to first of all thank you for your time. I always say time is a gift that you give and can never get back. So I really appreciate it. Welcome. Come on in. And so we want to start off by saying this is a really safe place. This is a place where you can't offend April or myself. We do these presentations all over the state. We're passing out some index cards because one of the things we've learned is sometimes people have questions that they're embarrassed to, they think, oh, I should know that, or I don't want to offend. That doesn't sound like a good thing to ask. So we always give those out and give you the opportunity to let us know what's on your mind. We really don't want you to leave here with any questions. We want to be as helpful as possible. So if you put your information and we don't get to it, we will get to it as soon as we can. So today's presentation, and let me find my clicker. I love technical things. Oh, April has it. Good. Okay. So welcome. And again, we're going to cover today tribal governments located in Oregon and common terms and some misconceptions, what not to say, especially in the workplace, and cultural considerations, and hopefully some time for Q&A. But first, we're educators, so we have to educate. And we're going to give you a pop quiz. And so April and Alexis will be coming around. And what we'd like you to do is on the back, on the blank side. So once you get it, turn it over on the blank side. And what we're going to ask you to do, normally April and I, we've learned some things from doing this. Normally we introduce ourselves and say what tribe we're from, but then we figured out that's like giving away some answers. So now we'll tell you that in a little bit. So will you list on the blank side of your map the tribes located in Oregon? The federally recognized tribes in Oregon. Good start. So we're going to give you extra credit points. And so next to the Confederated Tribes, if you can list any of the principal tribes in that confederation. and then I know it's okay to go on. So we have a bonus question for those of you who aren't too confident about your answers, and that's what percentage of Native Americans are in Oregon? The, yes, you can say it that way. This one's for, you know how students have different skill sets? This is one for you that are good in geography. So we're going to turn our map over, and we're going to write where those tribes are on your map.
All right. So, real quick, how many tribes are federally recognized tribes are in Oregon? 9. Did everybody, how many folks got all 9 tribes? Not one? How many got 8? 8? Yay, Alexis. Can you take her a poster? Yeah. 7? 6? A few 6s. Raise your hands high. You're getting a prize. 5. Okay, 4. 3. 2. All right, and then 1. All right. Well, let's see how you guys did. So there's the Burns Paiute tribe, and where might that be on the map? Around Burns, Harney County, Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw, North Bend, and that's where their tribal offices are located. Coquille Indian Tribe, Coos Bay, thank you. Cow Creek, Band of Umpqua Indians. Yes, correct. Klamath tribes, where their tribal offices are located. Chiloquin, Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla. You wonder what tribe Moan is with. Pendleton area, yes. Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. Oh, I skipped one. Yes, exactly. Madras area. Confederated Tribes of Sluts. Sluts, Lincoln City area. And I left mine for last, actually, because it's the best tribe. The Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. Yep, yes, exactly. All righty. So there we go. I'm going to hand this back to Mona.
Thank you. And we have a little answer key. We have lots of people that take these with them, and then when they come to another presentation, they get surprised that we're doing this. I like to add one more thing. by a raise of hands, how many people were born and raised here in Oregon? What's that say about our education and knowing our own people and our own history here in Oregon? I'm so thankful that SB 13, Tribal History, Shared History, passed, and April's working on that. ODE will be creating, do you want to talk about it? No, go for it. They'll create 4th, 8th, and 10th grade curriculum that will be taught in the schools. It'll be your 50,000-foot level of their 9 tribes, kind of what we just went through and what sovereignty and other things mean. And then ODE also gave money to tribes to create their own place-based curriculum, because it's so important for people to be able to tell their own stories. We've been talked about a lot, we've been researched a lot, and it's really time for us to start telling our own story. So hopefully, April and I, we want to work ourselves out of a job so that people are aware of the history here in Oregon. So we're going to go over some common terms, and as I said, tribal sovereignty, treaty, federal recognition, state recognition, member or citizen, and tribal or native affiliation. So tribal sovereignty, how many people know what that is? Okay, we have some hands. We have some hands.
Who would like to answer? Safe space.
I'll give it a shot. So as I understand, not that I'm an expert or anything, tribal sovereignty is that the tribe has the right to govern itself and has its own laws that are specific to that particular tribe. For entertainment purposes, in my early career, I was a bail bond agent. I learned as a bail bond agent in the state of Washington, I could not go onto tribal land to arrest a fugitive without the permission of the tribe.
Thank you. You gave an excellent explanation. And also, I want to thank you for prompting me for what I usually start out with. I don't know why I didn't. There are 573 tribes in the United States. Therefore, no one can be an expert in anything. And so if you ever get to a talk like this and somebody says they're an expert, you could just walk out. Just say, Mona said walk out, because nobody is an expert. And there's differences with every tribe. There's differences within a tribe. And we didn't even get to what a confederation is. That would take another half hour. And confederation simply means that there's more than one tribe located on that reservation. And so for mine, it's Umatilla, Walla Walla, and Cayuse. And for April's, I believe you have like 29.
We did at one point. We're down to 5 now, but
5
primary tribes, yeah.
And unfortunately, this is free. When they put us on reservations, they would try to put warring tribes together so that we could kind of finish off each other. And so a lot of times you'll hear people talking about tribal politics, and that's one of the reasons why, because they purposely put us together so we could fight among ourselves and not unite.
I think someone had a question, if that's okay.
This is Mike McCoy. Has there ever been an attempt to expand what you have by appealing to the federal government, by buying property and then annexing it into your reservation?
Thank you. That's a good question. Actually, there is a land buyback program that my tribe is doing, and I think other tribes as well. And there's also, I've read in the paper a couple of instances where people have donated land back. I was at a yard sale of all things, and this woman told me that she had a farm with like 80 acres and that her family decided to donate it back to the natives, and that was really awesome. Reminds me of a joke that somebody was at Home Depot and they had all these bags of dirt. And the cashier said, "What are you doing?" And it was a native gentleman. And he said, I'm buying my land back, one bag at a time. So, thank you for that. So, treaties are basically a contract, and it's made between the federal government and the tribal nation. And I always use the analogy about a Prius. If I go down to Toyota, say, I like that red Prius, can I have it? And I sign some paperwork, and then I don't keep my end of the bargain, pretty soon there's a tow truck at my house, and they're taking back the Prius because I didn't keep my end of the bargain. So a treaty is just that. It's an agreement, this for that. And people sign, and unfortunately, and I'm trying to cram a lot of history, unfortunately, sometimes they didn't have the right people at the table. That happens often. I'm a citizen of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, but I cannot talk for the Umatilla Indian Reservation. And it's the same like in Oregon. You're an Oregonian, but if you're in Paris, you can't talk for all Oregonians. You don't have that authority. So some of the treaties were not with the right people. And then I always ask, how many treaties have been kept in full? 0. That's right. There has not been one treaty with those 573 nations. Okay, 567 today. As of January, I promise, check me on this, there'll be 573 tribal nations. They approved, but they only put the Federal Register out once a year. So 567 treaties, and treaties are in the Constitution. They say it's the supreme law of the land. And just as you were referring to, reservations have their own laws, and we can't, the only thing we can't do is wage war and make currency. But other than that, we have all other things that a regular government would have. Federally recognized is just that, those that have a treaty with the United States. There's also state tribes, and they would be recognized by the state, but not the federal government. And Oregon has none of those. California has some, I think Nevada. There's some other states that have state recognition, but not federal. And then some of the other terms we said there was the member or citizen, and that goes to the treaty where people, that government can decide who is their citizen. So a lot of the time it goes by blood quantum, but not always. And sometimes it not only has blood quantum, but that you have to live there on the reservation. And sometimes not. And so it just depends. And then tribal or native affiliation, we have lots of people who've grown up on our reservations that are not tribal, but they're a part of our community. And often I hear people go, I was adopted by the Blackfeet. And so that affiliation would mean that they participate in all of the activities, if they're having powwows, if they learn how to bead. I have somebody on my reservation, and I think he's Hispanic, but he can bead and speak far better than a lot of our own citizens, myself included. So we went over, and you answered correctly that they can form their own government, and I think we covered that whole slide. Nice. So, do you want to cover this or no?
I can. Oh, sorry. So just some common misconceptions when working with Native peoples. As Mona said, there's 567 distinct federally recognized tribes, and there's a difference between federal recognition and I actually was talking to a colleague yesterday, and her husband's tribe is in the process of trying to become federally recognized, and so they're an Indian organization. So there's different types of recognition for tribes. Not all live on or near reservations. Both Mona and I are from tribes here in Oregon, but we don't live on or near our tribe. Some folks, I think the last count was of the 567, there was almost 400 tribes represented in Oregon, so from other tribes in other states. Some may have limited to no contact with their native heritage, traditions, and language. I have another good friend who lives on the reservation, and her kids are often asked to talk on behalf of the tribe, or, you know, what kind of language do you speak? And it's quite uncomfortable for them because they don't participate. Multiracial. We have another good friend whose last name is Garcia, and so her kids are both Latino and Native American. And I think a big misconception is that we all receive a lot of money. Can you not hear me? Oh, sorry. I can. That we receive benefits from our tribe, so free medical, free education, and that's not necessarily true. And that you can't be identified by physical appearance. So we often don't walk around in our day-to-day wearing regalia. So as some of our kiddos are displaying on the posters.
And if you look around, I know I gave one and she has red hair. And then we have Chelsea from Coquille. And if you've seen her in the supermarket, you may not think she's Native American. And so that's just something, since this is the employment department, to be aware of. You know, sometimes people, I know there's a father and son over there, and they, to me, may not appear as Native American. And so just be aware of that when people check I'm Native American, and people kind of give you that look like, oh, I don't think so. In talking about these posters, I love bringing them for that purpose, to show our diversity. It's also one of my primary roles is tribal attendance. And so I figured the best way to reach children is with other youth, talking about staying in school. So I actually got that because when I went for an interview and I stayed at my granddaughter's bedroom was full of posters, and there was none that were Native American. And I said, where are we? You know. So when I got this job, and part of it was marketing, I go, I'm doing posters. And so that's the story behind that. So we're going to go into some workplace protocols. And everybody's admired for a sense of humor. You know, sometimes I hear people go, what are you looking for in a mate? Well, they need to have a sense of humor. And so it's unique to everyone. So often a poorly chosen joke can be offensive, and it could get you in trouble legally. And so some things that are off limits in the workplace, and I know I'm speaking to the choir, and you could school me in this, but this is what we were thinking, is that you should never talk about sexual orientation or acts, religious or political practices or beliefs, race or ethnicity, social status, gender, age-related stereotypes. I get asked all the time, when are you going to retire? But physical appearance and attributes, weight-related issues, disabled persons or persons with any form of diminished capacity, any topic that targets an individual as being inferior, or I like to say other. We often other people, and it could be as simple as their accent. So sometimes your intent versus impact, you may say one thing, but somebody can hear another. And so just be aware of that sometimes words can have hidden meanings also. They can be charged. And I like to go over these for myself personally. I made that, hey, chief. And so think of this when you're with a group of friends, when you're watching TV. I happen to like Law and Order. I do not know why. But they're always saying like, hey, chief, or off the reservation. And that one drives me crazy. Can anybody guess why I hate off the reservation? Somebody? Okay.
Doesn't that infer that you're crazy? Or
No, I don't think it's that. I think I haven't heard that, but I could be. Yeah, when I've watched it. No, I'm not. I guess if you think you are, then you really aren't. But no, wrong thing. Yes, you.
hi, it's where you're where you're not supposed to belong. You don't belong off the reservation.
Right. In fact, thank you. Back in the someplace where you don't belong. Back in the early days, they had papers that the Indian superintendent would sign. And if I said, hey, I want to go to Lincoln City, I had to get permission and have it signed and show my papers if I was off the reservation. So that drives me crazy. Too many chiefs and not enough Indians. Hold down the fort. They're on the warpath. We should get together and have a powwow about that. Rain dance. Low man on the Potom Toll. How many people have heard that? Yep, okay. And Indian giver, which happens to be my favorite one because you say Indian giver, and you think you're insulting the person, but it's like people gave something to the Indians and then they took it back. So it's really something on them, but they can't figure that out. So, all right. Did any of those surprise anyone? Yeah, pretty common. And we hear it in everyday life. I truly do. I try not to listen for it, but it's just in my face. So just think before you speak. Humor should be inclusive to be well received. And so in order to avoid the pitfalls, as I said, think before you speak and do your homework. It's as simple as a lot of times people will tell us, I don't want to offend you. What should I call you? And it's like, well, Mona, and it's like, it's that simple. Just asking somebody, what do you prefer? A lot of tribal people I've met, they like to be called by their nation. If they're like Blackfeet, I'm from the Blackfeet Nation. And so you just need to know. I have a dear friend who's no longer with us, but he used to like to be called an Indian because he was part of the American Indian movement in the 70s, and that really meant something to him. And I like to be called Native American because that lets me know that Columbus didn't discover anything. So I like Native American, and we were really close friends, but we had two different preferences. So just ask somebody what they like. That's what we mean by do your homework. When in doubt, just close your mouth. The way this came about, and I think Teresa came to it, me and two other colleagues were in elevators, and we got the craziest comments. We had, and it was me, elevator opens, completely full. And this woman goes, hey, Mona, I could be really racist and say, let's form a human totem pole. And then the door shut, and I'm like, but you just said that. And it was like, for about 3 days in a row, we kept getting these really off-the-wall remarks. So we finally said, we need to tell people, don't do that. So when you see something, say something. Talk to HR or a trusted ally, and respect and know your policies at work, I think especially, that can help avoid. We wanted to talk about a few barriers in applying for work in case any of your work involves that. We've heard late summer ODE did a survey of new and recent hires, and here are some of the things that they said, and we wanted to highlight that online applications does not allow people to have any personal interactions with people, and it also, in Pendleton, if you've ever been there, they don't have high-speed internet everywhere, and there's just a lot of things that online applications only can raise for people, and also not to go to age, but some people just can't navigate that, uploading this or whatever the ask is. So that's just something to think about. And then the next one, I'm going to have to get a little water here, sorry. I talk a lot, but wow, that's a lot of talking. The next one is about just some cultural norms. Again, going back to nobody's an expert, but here's some common themes. Eye contact. Have you ever been in an interview and somebody said, I just don't know, they didn't make any eye contact, I just can't trust that person, or even in a social setting? Well, for me, growing up, we were taught not to make eye contact because that's very rude and it's insulting, it's a challenge. And so for us, if you look somebody in the eye, it becomes a contest who's weak and will look away first. And I can't tell you how many times I got slapped on the head and, what are you looking at? If it was somebody older. And so eye contact for me is a challenge. I've done all the things about, looking at your nose or your forehead or da-da-da-da or your hair, but it's very difficult. And so it's hard to change something you were raised with. And then another one is handshakes. How many people have shook a hand of a Native American and noticed that it's just like this half a shake? They barely touch you. I don't know if you've noticed, but handshakes are not firm and they're not, aggressive. So that's another thing that can hurt Native Americans when they're applying for jobs, because you're not looking in the eye, you're not giving that firm handshake. And I think when we see people talking about how to interview, they rarely talk about cultural differences. Okay, so also engagement, whether it's in an interview or in a team meeting, and people are saying, okay, what did you think about that project X? What's your opinion? And then there's all these type A's, which I kind of think I might be a closet type A. You compare me and April, it's like, yeah. So people can be misunderstood if they're not engaging adequately. And there's something that we don't always do in the workplace, and that's give information in multiple modalities. And some people are visual, some people have to have something written, some people have to do or be interactive, show me, kinesthetics. There are all different forms, but usually what happens, and I know why, because we're all limited on resources and time, and we create this one professional development and say, okay, fit into that. Here, did you go to iLearn and do this? And it's like, I went to iLearn and I clicked, but I may not have learned anything. So I'm just telling you the truth, I'm sorry. So then, going back to engagement, sometimes, look at April and I, one is quiet and one isn't, and so sometimes people take longer. There are a lot of Native Americans that I know that will think. If you ever met my husband, you could ask a question, he's like, and he's just thinking of, he was an engineer, but he's thinking of every different angle possible. And he's thinking and thinking about, yeah, well, in third grade, yeah, and he's thinking where I gave 15 answers already. And so it's like, if somebody takes longer to answer or engage, they can be penalized for being thought they're slow. He's just kind of a slow guy. Well, he's actually much smarter because he doesn't get his foot in his mouth as often as I do. So, so let's go on to, again, 567 communities or nations. There's no one common way of being, but here's some really high-level themes that we see, and that's Did you stand out from the crowd? There are so many people who say, when they're telling you, the 7 highly effective habits of a manager, or yada, 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 it's always like, stand out. Make that presentation just really stellar, or even your dress, or even the way you talk. Just make sure when you're in that meeting and that boss is there, you need to stand out. And then, next slide, please. That's okay. Many Native people that I know are more team orientated, and they happen to never brag about what they're doing because it's really thought to be bad form, just bad judgment. Just if we find a Native American just bragging and bragging and bragging and something, they're not typical to us. And most Natives like to brag about the team. And we did this. My colleague and I did this. And we share, successes with everybody. This can hurt. It can hurt in an interview. I can't tell you how many times people go, tell us about yourself, I don't ever go, well, I have a master's and I worked here for 20 years and I can do this and I've written policies and not afraid to talk. And and instead I'll go, well, I'm a wife and I'm a grandmother, and I start telling you about me, because when you say tell me about yourself, that's what you're going to get more often than not. And I won't even think to start bragging. And it won't feel comfortable to talk about my accomplishments. Only because, and what did we say, 7,500 of us have master's degrees? So that's like, out of all the Native Americans you meet, 7,500 of us have a master's. And that should be something that you could talk about, but it's not comfortable for us. We're much more comfortable, at least April and I, and really April, in talking about the team. So we wanted to say, sorry, I don't have a clock, so I want to make sure we don't go over. If you have a welcoming or an orientation, that it would be really beneficial to make sure it's culturally sensitive. And I know you can't bend to every culture, but lots of times going back to, we don't like to brag about ourselves, we don't like to stand out. And if we're in a room like this, if I were not here because of my work and I was here, and I would not want to be everybody saying, tell me about yourself. I would go towards the wall. Not that I'd be quiet, but I just wouldn't be the center of attention. So just be aware of that. And you could pick up on that really easily. I like what Oprah says, give somebody 5 minutes and they'll tell you who they are. So make sure if somebody's not comfortable and you don't, I had a friend who taught, and he would sit there and he would say, I can wait. And he'd ask a question, and he would wait until somebody would talk. And it was so uncomfortable. Do you know how long we can wait with silence? Not very long. But a lot of us don't like to be the center. And so when you have your orientation, just be aware of that. Sometimes even when I've noticed when people have those 5 and 10 year anniversary awards, people are cringing, going, I don't want to go up there, Just simply walking up and grabbing your little thing and sitting down. They get really nervous about that. All right. It might be good if you're a large enough agency to think about having affinity groups, and so that people, I worked in colleges for 20 years and we were so big on recruiting, and it wasn't until towards the end that we started thinking about retention. Because it's one thing to get somebody through your door, somebody talented, but it's another to keep them there. And you keep them there by creating those workspaces that they feel comfortable and safe, and they don't have to explain themselves over and over. They can talk to somebody who knows where they're coming from and can understand. All right. So we just wanted to encourage you to celebrate everybody's differences and uniqueness that comes into your workplace. Everybody has a gift and a talent. And sometimes those bright, shiny stars kind of dull somebody else who's more quiet. And you don't recognize that they're also a bright, shining star, but they're they don't have any room. They don't get any. I always think of that song, "You Were the Wind Beneath My Wings." And so we all have talents, and we need to recognize that. We need to honor that in people, and we need to let people know we see that. I told this man, and I am not kidding you. I was at this, we call it a community conversation. And I was sitting at a table, and I noticed this poor man kept trying to talk, and nobody would let him because there was a lot of me's there. And so finally I went up to him, and I said, I see you. I know you're here, and I want to hear you. And so now every time that guy sees me, he just runs to me and, Mona, because I recognized him, even though he wasn't that loud, boisterous one. But people at work need that. We need to recognize the hard work of our coworkers, and it's so much easier, and maybe I'm talking to myself, to complain about what somebody's doing instead of seeking out that good and that value and recognizing it in each other. It will change your workplace, I promise. If your agency has the benefit of having a mentoring program, be sure you try to match up people who are culturally sensitive. And, like we were talking about, did you stand out? You don't want to get one of those type A, Stephen Covey kind of guys. Not that we need them too, but just be aware of who you're matching up so that you can draw out those qualities and skills from employees instead of shutting them down. And then I think next steps, what we were hoping you would do is turn to your neighbor and see how could you use any of this information in your work, the things that you do, whether it's recruiting, whether it's maybe I need to recognize somebody a little more and quit complaining about them. Everybody could have something that I hope meant something to you today in this short presentation. So just take a minute and talk to your neighbor and see how this might apply to your work. All right. All right, we are so excited to hear all that. I hope it's not talking about a good new lunch place and it's really kind of processing our talk, but lunch places are important too. So we wanted to know if there's any questions that we might answer.
Mike McCoy again. How are the 500 plus native tribes working on getting their languages recreated? Some of them, I think, have lost them, but I just don't know how that's going, because that's a key in terms of having you folks refound your foundations, I think.
Thank you. That's a very important question about how are the 567 tribes restoring their languages. As another talk about boarding schools and having our language forcibly removed. We were punished if we talked. Both my mother and father were in boarding schools, and they try to make that historic, but I'm a product of boarding schools, I always say. So I love that, because there are words for those of you who are bilingual, there are words that you cannot say in a different language. And so there are efforts. I am really proud of the Tribal Attendance Pilot Project because I look at that very broadly. And there is, in Pendleton, they started putting up Welcome in Umatilla, and they started, when half-day kindergarten moved to full-day kindergarten, they said, hey, Mona, why don't we do half the day in Umatilla? And I was like, what? And I've always used that as the best example of collaboration when your allies think of something before you can even think about it. And so we did that. We have half-day kindergarten in Umatilla. That's when I knew I was free to leave Pendleton. I was like, I've done all I can do here. But there are efforts. I know Warm Springs has had language. They used to have a program called Sunrise, and fortunately, the new superintendent allowed them to move that into the school day. So Warm Springs and Pendleton have language. Grand Ronde's been teaching for a long time. They've all already been in university, I believe. And so slowly we are trying to reclaim our languages. And we're starting with the young because, you know, it's really hard to teach, you know that saying. It's hard to teach somebody a new language as you age. I have trouble remembering English, so But yes, they are trying to revitalize. Any other questions?
Any questions on the webinar?
There are currently no questions.
I had a question about books. Recently, I read Astoria and another book called Thunder in the Mountains, Chief Joseph. And I found him really enlightening as far as history in this area and a lot of things I didn't know. And I don't know a lot about tribal history, but, you know, it's history growing up in the Northwest that I found interesting. I wondered if you had any comments on those books, or you had other books you might recommend on Native Americans in this region.
Thank you. I love Chief Joseph because he was Cayuse, even though the Nez Perce always claim him. He was half Cayuse, so I always say I have a big picture of him in my office because it's, you know, I'm Cayuse, so I want to say he's half. So what I would say, we have a list. Oh,
Sorry. I can get you a list that Grand Ron put together, and it's just with the Northwest tribes, but our librarian did it. Leave me your email address, and I'll get it to you.
or we'll just send it to Teresa and you could put.
Yep, absolutely.
We also have a list of resources here that you feel free to take with you. Here's the answer key to where the tribes are. So next time you're in one of our presentations, you could whip it out of your purse or something. We're also going to leave these for you.
Sorry, a question from the webinar. How many tribes are still seeking federal recognition?
Oh, we can't start to answer that. Thank you. That is one of those really hard things to, even the whole process of recognition breaks my heart, because I did 20 years up in Washington, and the last thing Bill Clinton did was recognize the Duwamish people, where Chief South came from, where the word Seattle came from, and then the first thing that the incoming president did was unrecognize them. And so it breaks my heart to say one day you recognize your Duwamish, next day you're not. Here in Oregon, we had... I'm
sorry, I'll take it into the mic. So during termination era, there was 100 tribes approximately terminated. In Oregon, 66. So across the U.S. So Oregon really did take quite a hit when it came. Any idea why Oregon? For sure, we were the last, one of the last, but resources. So our timber, our waterways, a little bit of gold. But anyways, but yeah, it was really sad. 66 tribes out of the 100 across the U.S. So.
And I always like to say 2 were not. So Umatilla being one, I think we're too stubborn. But
So there were tribes that were, a lot of tribes were terminated in Oregon. Umatilla was not one of them. Warm Springs also wasn't, and Burns, Paiute there. But they, again, this is a longer training opportunity, but
Tribal 103.
There we go.
Look for it.
I did want to tell. I just read this book. It's called X Marks. I'm almost through it, and it gives a really good baseline about treaties and signing treaties and what it means. And so I would recommend it. It's Scott Richard Lyons, X Marks. Sorry, I just had to plug this one in.
Thank you. I can't wait till she finishes, because then I'm borrowing it. But I keep saying, are you done? Remember, we have the additional resources, the map key, and posters for those of you that would like to take some. We also are going to do a shameless plug on future Lunch and Learns. So DSH is going to have some activities tomorrow in Portland, and we had some yesterday that we collaborated with a number of agencies to have, and it was very well attended.
And if you've never gone to Rock Your Mocks, that's awesome. Rock Your Moccasins.
And PSU is going to have a very important deconstruction Thanksgiving lecture and a panel discussion. And then we will be having a tribal government praxis of working with tribal governments lunch and learn on the 29th. So we're going to take a state agency and we're going to use them as an example of how working with tribal governments was a success. And I love using the praxis because I'm still paying my student loans off, and I thought I should throw in a word that and then Salem Kaiser will be having a wonderful celebration the evening of November 30th. Both April and I will be there. And with that, we would like to thank you again for your time, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.